Hi, friends. Amy here. I'm so excited to spend this time with you. We're going to be pondering or musing about something that I find to be one of the most life giving treasures of my entire existence. It has also been, at times, I would say, even life saving. It has caused me great consternation, and it frequently brings a lot of frustration. All of that consternation and frustration, in fact, add to the life giving nature of this treasure. I call it spiritual practice. That term might be quite familiar to you, it might be brand new, it might be something that you don't like at all. So, we're going to talk about that later. We're going to talk about spiritual, we're going to talk about practice, we'll talk about that together. But I'm going to invite you to release that term. If it feels better to you, if it makes you more open to this pondering, then choose a different phrase. A couple that are in my heart this morning are moments of mindfulness or touchstones of beauty. That last one is my husband's creation. We might talk about that later. So the term itself has a lot of weight. You can choose to embrace that weight. You can choose to let it go. Because what I want to talk about is the gifts of this thing, this treasure. If you found your way to Passings, it is likely that you are either going through some transition in your life. You have a new baby, you're changing schools, you're moving, you are perhaps dealing with a terminal diagnosis. You've lost a job, something has changed in your life. You perhaps you have gone through that transition, and on the other side, you're looking to stabilize or perhaps make sense or meaning of a huge transition. Maybe you're at Passings because you are supporting someone who is going through a transition. It's my firm belief that every human is in one of those situations at all times, and there are times when we're in more than one. Because life is all about transition, it's about change. I like to think of transitions in terms of architecture. So if you imagine your life as a big architectural structure, the blueprints were there when you were born, but you've spent a lifetime building that structure. A transition changes the structure. It might be a tiny addition. Maybe you're putting a deck onto your life. Maybe it's something that's huge. It's an entire renovation of a whole wing. It could be something that rocks the very foundation of your life. Sometimes we think we're just putting on a deck with a little change, adding a baby to a big family, or changing careers. And what we find is as we put on the deck, we might need to go into the foundation and rework some of that foundation. So transition shakes things up. As humans, even though we know that life is a constant series of changes, we rebel against that. We like to feel secure. What spiritual practice does for me and for so many others is it provides a scaffolding around our lives so that we can go through these transitions feeling a little bit more stable. One of my favorite forms of architecture is Gothic cathedrals, especially French. And if you've ever seen them in person or in a photograph, you know that these structures reach toward the sky and they look so gracefully light. Even though they're made of stone, they look like a wedding cake or a lace dress. They let in all of this light and beauty through stained glass windows. There's this feeling of lightness, and it's meant to pull our attention up, heavenward, skyward. But in order for that lightness to be there, there has to be a lot of structure on the outside. So if you go to the outside of the cathedral, you'll see all of these buttresses and you'll see this heavy stone. That's kind of what I think of as practice. I can keep living my life and letting in all this light only because I have this strong, steady focus of practice. So my invitation today is for you to just ponder what practices you might already be doing, what practices you might bring into your life, and how they might help you through whatever transition you're going through, even if that transition is like us in Colorado on this very day, a transition back to winter after a time of spring. We have that a lot here. Those two words, as I said, are problematic for a lot of people. I'll start with practice. For me, the word practice used to be very difficult because I knew that word to always be in reference to something, that I was practicing for something. My first memory of having a lot of practice around one specific activity was when I began to play the piano when I was very young. I practiced. I knew I was supposed to practice for 30 minutes every day, so I would set the timer and I would practice diligently. And I thought what I was doing was practicing for an event. And I was frequently practicing for the next recital and later the next concert. Sometimes it was just practicing to get this piece of music suitable to accompany my family as we sang Christmas carols. But it was always with a goal in mind. Spiritual practice sometimes has that. The challenge is that with spiritual practice, the part of us that is goal-oriented is often the part that we want to release from the activity of spiritual practice. So the part of you that wants to sit down and be a good meditator or be great at singing hymns or do wonderful prayer work, that part of you will get constantly frustrated by this practice. And that's exactly as it should be. So practice for this, in this realm, means yes, we're practicing for something, but here's the thing, we don't know what it is. We can only look back and realize, oh, that practice served me in this way. So when I first found out that I was dying almost 20 years ago, what I realized is that I had not practiced dying. And of course, that sounds obvious. I had never died before, never been chronically ill before, never been terminally ill, certainly. But I had never practiced surrender. I had never practiced letting go. I was 30, and my culture had not taught me about letting go and practicing surrender. So I spent the next many, many years practicing this act of surrender. Part of me was thinking, in my old frame of practice, that this practice was so that I would get good at it, so that I would know how to die. What I now know is that's not true. After that first death experience, I had others that were even more challenging, even though I had practiced. And that was hard for me. That was hard for my ego to say, but I kind of knew how to do this before. Why do I not know now? What I now know is that I've been practicing not for my eventual death. I don't know what that will look like. I have no idea. That practice of surrender is something that gives me life every single day. And that's, when we're talking about spiritual practice, that's what this really is. It's not about getting good at something. It's not about achieving a goal. It's not even sometimes about what happens during the practice. Those of you who have been meditating for a long time or doing prayer, specifically more silent prayer, you know, sometimes those periods are awful and your mind is absolutely outrageously out of control and running with thoughts. The intent is not to get good at prayer in the moment. The intent is to let prayer change you, or meditation change you, or dance change you. And we notice the effects of practice when we're not in the practice. We notice the effects of yoga when we can sit on the floor. We notice the effect of breath practice when we have a cold and we suddenly know how to feel our lungs because we've done this practice. So practice, be careful with that word. If you want to use something different, like I said, touchstones or moments, please feel free to do that. That other word, spiritual, also is equally loaded. For some of you, that will be really challenging. You've been part of a tradition that has let you down or perhaps even abused you. For some of you, that word spiritual will be very woo-woo and new age, and you don't want to deal with that. The fullness of that term, though, is describing a connection. That is a connection with something that's simultaneously very precise and minute, and also vast and expansive. When I use the term spiritual, I'm talking about anything that connects you to your essence, to what's true for you, to your values, to what you hold most dear. And also it connects you with other people. It might connect you with your heritage, your lineage. It might connect you with the land, might connect you with the big stuff like love or God. So spiritual practice is something, any practice, any activity that you do routinely and with awareness that brings you closer into yourself and at the same time more outward and connected to all. Use whatever term you want for that. It's likely you might already be doing a practice. It might be part of your heritage, and if that works for you, that is great. Many of you belong to long traditions and long lineages that are based in practice, and you find a lot of stability there. That's certainly true for me. But I'm going to invite you to consider that some practices we happen upon when we least expect it. My last time in the hospital in ICU, I had been doing death practices consistently for 15 years with teachers, with friends, with students. But when I was in the hospital this time, those practices were not what I found myself doing all the time. They came in and out of my days. But what happened was a new practice was kind of born through me. So I was trying to increase my lung capacity, and any of you who have ever had any kind of surgery probably, but especially those of us who have had heart and lung issues know what this is. We use this device to practice increasing our lung capacity. I needed to do that to prepare me for another surgery, and then after that surgery to recover from the surgery. It was super hard. For those of you who have great lung capacity, this is pretty easy and it's kind of cool. You get to see how strong you are. For those of us who have decreased lung capacity, just doing this can knock us out. We can get so exhausted. We can come up and have coughing fits. And that's where I was at the time. I was trying so hard to focus both on my physical capacity, but also to make this connected to my greater connection to spirit. At the time, I had also been doing the rosary for years and years. Here's one of many rosaries I have. And I had the rosary right there, but my cognitive awareness, my function was not such that I could do the whole rosary. I could not stay with it. I had decreased oxygen to my brain. Obviously, I couldn't stay with the prayer after prayer after prayer. But what happened was a beautiful prayer that we were left with by Julian of Norwich kept filtering into my mind. And here's this simple prayer. All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. So somehow in my heavily medicated state, in my decreased cognitive awareness, these two tools, seemingly so different, wove themselves together into a practice so that I would take my breath and I would do one Julian prayer and hold the beads. Be open. You might find a practice taking over you. The practice might meet you rather than you going out to seek it. There's a lot to be said for practicing something for a long time because it stays with us. I have patients now in hospice who have not spoken in months, sometimes even years. And if I know that they've done a certain prayer throughout their life, I will repeat it to them. The Lord's Prayer is a Christian prayer that many, many people have. If they are of a Catholic tradition, they might have done the rosary. When I speak the prayer, when I put beads in their hands, something happens. There's a physical, emotional, psychological memory that kicks into place. And so people who have not spoken in a very long time, I will see their lips move when we're praying together. People who I'm not even sure if they're aware of my presence. If I put the rosary in their hands, knowing that this is a practice of theirs, of course, they will start to touch the beads in a way that I know they have done for decades. So whatever your tradition is, if you have one, my advice is to keep it in play in whatever way suits you and know that it might really serve you in the future. If you don't have a tradition, or if you have a tradition, if you were raised in a tradition that no longer serves you or causes you pain, let go. Pull in something that seems unspiritual, that seems very mundane. Do whatever you need to keep pulling you back to both your essence and what is vast. and unending. We've got lots of resources on the website. We will soon be posting, so by the time you watch this, they should be up, to interviews I've got with friends of mine who are deep, profound practitioners and who define that term, spiritual practice, in broad, expansive ways. We've got a little audio of me walking you through my favorite practice. It's one breath. It takes one breath. And it's been life-giving for me. And if you'd like to explore practice, if you think this is something I'd like these touchstones of beauty or moments of mindfulness, get in touch with me. There's so many ways to practice. Some of you practice through activism. Some of you practice through dancing. Some of you practice through making macaroni and cheese for your toddler. All of this can be practiced if we do it mindfully and with intent. So give me an email, send me an email, amyagape@passings, and we will explore how practice might serve you during this transition, after this transition, or as you're transitioning, or as you're supporting someone else while they transition. Spiritual practice, moments of mindfulness, touchstones of beauty. I invite you to try them out. Thank you.